to figure all that stuff out on their own.
We have a real good thing.
All right, tell them we're live.
We are live. We are live, and you're getting me at this unique moment where you're seeing me as a nominally responsible adult, Pete.
You have your cousins there visiting, your cousins' kids. You call them your cousins. I don't know what anything means. I was just hanging out with my once removed or whatever. Had a great time with them. But there's three of them there. There are two boys and a girl.
There's two of them, and they are my dad's brother's kids. So it's my cousin.
Got it.
And these are his children. He and his wife's children. So
now,
I'm hanging out with them.
Do you like to hang? Like, do you choose? Hey, I'd like to hang out with these kids. You don't have kids. You like to be around kids. You serve a girl.
Yeah, they're family. I like love them to death. Like I have a lot of fun with them and get to see them pretty frequently. And we hang out, and sometimes I just want to like play video games. But today is, you do the thing that you do for family, which is everybody, their parents have stuff that they have to do today. And I was like, cool. I'll take the boys. We'll go to the park. We'll go to the movies. We'll do all the fun stuff. That's
the question I was asking. Really, it's because sometimes you say to your cousin or to your sibling who has kids, you say, "Hey, listen, if you ever need someone to take them, I'm here for you. Just don't ask, because I like being around and we have a good time and to help you guys out." But sometimes people just say, "Hey, let me take the kids. Let's go have some fun." And I can see you wanting to borrow anybody's kids because you're a child.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you have a lot of common interests in terms of film, television, video games, toys, comic books. Like so much of your interest, I imagine, crosses over, especially with the traditional little American boy. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, look, the thing is, I go and hang out with them, and sometimes I'll just be like, let me just take the boys and we'll go to the park. And, it's funny. You're a parent, so you know what this is like. The greatest gift that you can ever give parents is like just sometimes an afternoon and just be like, hey, I'm going to come by so you can nap. And I'm just going to take the kids to the park and get them some ice cream or stuff like that. So yeah. And they're very, very smart and very curious. And so that's also very fun for me because they will banter back and forth with me and whatever it is that I want to ask. And of course, question me relentlessly.
Right. That must be fun to have you, a PhD, as a kind of role model adult that they can ask questions to that isn't a parent. And also, I can't imagine how you're radicalizing them with your views.
That is the plan. Look, I definitely do that with my goddaughter, who's 14 now. I mean, I've been planting the seeds of revolution since she was a child. And the things that I used to tell her when she was 9, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so political." Now she's saying that they're all right. I got the most validating text message in the world. Again, I know you appreciate this. She said, "I need to ask your opinion because you're right about things." I'm going to frame that. Like a 14-year-old saying like, because you're right about things a lot is amazing. I was very pleased. So, when she's 16, she'll say I'm wrong again. So
I think a guy like you's got a lot of words. Me too. Not as many and not always as good or as appropriate, but I got a lot of words, a comedian and a person that reads and stuff. But in our case, it's more actions speak louder than words. So they watch how you conduct yourself and so on. And now you've got propaganda literally on. Why don't you lean back and show the people what you're wearing around these young black children?
Black voters matter.
It was either that or I was going to say Aquaman. Sure. You probably.
Yeah, I was going to have something with a kufi or an ankh on it, just, to give the kids a general idea that they should constantly be fighting the man.
Do you think like those kids seem to be their dad has a pretty good job, you told me, and stuff? Like, do you think young, black kids in upper middle class neighborhoods, much less and others, are more attuned to and paying more attention to what's going on in the kind of the larger world? Because I feel like apathy is of all young people because they're young and things are going good.
Here's the thing. I don't know if I consider it to be apathy depending on their age, right? Yeah. They're kids. I mean, like their greatest adventure is watching cartoons. Once you get to say 12, 13, 14, then your awareness of the world outside of your home and immediate family kind of increases. But I think kids 10 and below, their whole life is their family, you know, unless it is brought up in the terms of like, let's say, you know, if you're 8 and you have a cousin or a sibling who is developmentally disabled, right?
Right.
Where you're going to be aware of things that another 9-year-old isn't going to know, right?
But I guess what I'm getting at, because I really don't know the answer to this, I'm not sure that you do either. It's because it's so much different than it was when we were growing up. But what I'm getting at is if you have less, a lot of times people will say, you know, when they're growing up, I didn't know how bad it was. To me, I had a great childhood, even though we had nothing. You know, my parents loved me and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like now, if that's your lot in life, if you're living in the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, I guess, or if you're living in poverty, you do know how the other half or the others are living because of social media, because of the internet, and maybe you don't because you're not on it because you're 6.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on what you get access to. So I'll give you a perfect example. Like, you know, I have a yard, right? Like, I don't have a jungle gym or whatever else it is in my yard. I got a front and a backyard. As far as they're concerned, there's like dirt and rocks and sticks. That's awesome. That's a yard, you know, for them. So all things being relative, kids only know what they know. And I think even in a way, social media only has an impact if you really understand the world outside of your house. If you don't really see the world outside of your house or outside of where your parents take you or school or something else like that, seeing a big mansion on social media when you're 8 or 9 years old, I mean, you recognize it's a big house, but that doesn't necessarily make you think yours is small because everything you want to do is in your house. So, you know, I think that like comparison requires a level of experience that some children don't have. And I say that as somebody, again, I am not a parent, right? I have active roles in my goddaughter's lives and cousins and stuff like that. But I think in a lot of cases, kids are still kids. They are still kids. It is refreshing how oblivious they are to the shenanigans that happen all over the planet. Now, again, if I'm 7 and my mother or father has been yanked out of their car by ICE agents, then I am aware of the world, right? If I am 10 and I see my dad get harassed by a cop or yelled at in a store, like your introduction to the cruelties and vagaries of the world at large have to do with what you've seen through your parents' eyes, because you're probably not going to experience it yourself directly.
I could talk to you about this and these perspectives for a long time. I want to ask you a bunch of things. We haven't talked in a while, off or in public on air.
Dude, I've been running like crazy. In the last month, I have been I've had an insane travel schedule for the last month, like 3 weeks straight. I gave a speech in Indianapolis. Went to the WNBA All-Star thing. I had a tooth pulled, which was crazy. Then I was in Charleston for a speech, and I was at San Diego Comic-Con. Then I was in New York, and then I was back in DC, like back to back. And then I just finished hosting for like 4 or 5 straight days. So the last month has been like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I did see that you were on MSNBC last night, and I'm glad you're busy if that's what you want to be. And doing a lot. You're also, so what else are you doing, like work wise? You're back to teaching in the fall semester.
Yeah. So classes start in like 2 weeks. So, you know, be teaching my usual media literacy class. And then I'm not sure what I'm teaching to graduate students yet. I got to double check my syllabus. I was at Comic-Con this year talking to a bunch of different publishers about my graphic novel. You know, my graphic novel is finished. So now we're just doing the shopping publisher thing, which is super exciting. And connecting it with artists and stuff like that. Thanks to your advice and suggestion, I have been working on my YouTube and learning how that works and all the different dynamics that come into play. So it's been an active summer. I'm actually uncharacteristically optimistic about the fall. I think there's like a lot of awesome projects that I'm a bunch of different pies I'm baking right now. So I expect it to be a good fall. To be a good fall. I mean, you know, football season is about to start, so I'm going to be doing a lot of sports stuff too.
I don't care about that. Well, that's so that you're busy with all that, and I love the YouTube stuff that you've been doing. I think that's great. It's a kind of a different style commentary, and you get to do longer form and talk about what you want to talk about. You know, when you're working with producers, whether you're an anchor, whether you're a guest, the team comes up with the issues and editorializes. And when you're independent, it's good to have an editor or many or producers or partners. But when you're doing this, you can do whatever you want, whatever you think is most important. And right now, I think talking to you is about a lot of these different issues. I talked to our friend Chrissy Greer yesterday. I want to kind of retread just a little bit of that if people saw or heard that. Just get your general take on how you're seeing first of all, the distraction, it's fair to say, from the Epstein files, but specifically what this militarization of the police and what we're seeing in DC. I wanted to get your take on how you're seeing that.
So
and how it's being covered too, if you want.
Yeah. So I will say this: the public has a lot of interest in the Epstein files. I am less interested in the Epstein files. I'm as a story itself, it is not that interesting to me. Right?
How is that fucking in any way possible?
So, and here's why. And I understand why much of the public is interested. The story itself doesn't do that much for me because ultimately exposure without consequence doesn't interest me. If you vote for Donald Trump, I mean, the man is in power now. He's established his sort of authoritarian regime. If you voted for Donald Trump, the fact that he is a sex pest, that he assaults women, that he harasses women, all of those things are known. They're already baked into the cake. Right. The man talked about, we're not just talking about grabbing women in their private parts. We're talking about a guy who's like, I had teen pageants and I walked in when women were in various states of undress. So like, it doesn't change much. Okay. So you have the Epstein files and it reveals that Donald Trump was, directly engaging in, sexual activity with children. Okay. Is that going to make anybody change their vote? I doubt it. Well, is that going to make anybody, because all the Republicans will have to do is say, oh, look over here at trans teens playing soccer. And so to me, the value of the Epstein files is only if, and I've always asked this on the air, I've asked this of guests. I'm like, so if we get these files, are you going to prosecute anybody? If you get these files, are you going to hold anybody else accountable? Because if you don't, I don't necessarily see the point.
So I guess the consequences would be a lack of support for Trump on everything else if he's lying about this thing. This
you really think? Have you not seen the Congress? Have you not seen the Republican Congress for the last 10 years? They won't care. They're going to still support him anyway. The idea, I keep saying this, like this idea that something's going to save us, right? That some magical immunity totem is going to pop in and save us from Donald Trump is just that math ain't math, and that ship has sailed. There could be videos that come out tomorrow showing him, in a all sorts of grotesque sexual behavior with children, and a lot of people would just say, "Oh man, that's AI," or "Oh man, that's terrible," or "Wait, what about Bill Clinton? What about George Soros?"
Right.
So, I don't know. It doesn't move me in the same way. I recognize that it's news and I recognize the public's interest. But for me personally as a citizen, and again, I make the distinction between what is newsworthy and me personally as a citizen, if it ain't attached to anybody going to jail, I'm not that moved.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you weighed in on that. It's a really, as usual, unique and interesting perspective from you. What do you think about, though, the media's coverage of it? Do you think that if you were in charge of mainstream media, how would you cover it or not cover it?
If I were in charge of mainstream media, then the number one question, which is what I ask when I'm on the air, I'm like, what happens when it gets out? What happens when it gets out? What happens? Are you going to prosecute people? Because if you're not going to prosecute people, Pete, it's kind of like me saying, okay, it's like, we've seen this a million times with Trump, right? It's like his tax returns. It's like, everybody turns in their tax returns for the run for president. You're going to turn in your tax returns? No, I'm not going to turn in my tax returns. I think, like Rachel Maddow got like a piece of his tax returns once. After he got elected the first time. And it's one of those things where it's like, and that was valuable. Like I thought the journalism she was doing was fantastic because it's like, yes, This is information the public needs to know. If this man has conflicts of interest, the public needs to know. But if Congress is too feckless to hold him accountable or to establish boundaries for the conflicts of interest, okay, it's exposed. It's good to know, but I want to move on to the things that actually control his behavior, constrain his behavior, or hold him accountable. Shame doesn't work for people who are essentially shameless.
That's a soundbite.
Mm-hmm. I believe the kids say bars.
So what do you think is most important? I mean, what do you want to there's two things that I think I really want to get your take on, but maybe there's something more important that I'm missing in terms of the fascist takeover from the Department of Homeland Security actions across the country, and the deportations is a big deal, to the militarization of the police and the takeover of Washington, D.C., and having there seeming to be no limits, according to Tom Homan, on the president's authority. And I also obviously thought it's really important to talk anytime we can about what the federal government led by Trump is doing in terms of erasing history. So, about, and I'm sure I already covered what they're trying to do with the museums, the Smithsonian museums. Mm-hmm. And then finally, tying all that together, I'm sure you saw that Department of Homeland Security put out a recruiting promotion.
Oh, the Stormtrooper recruiting poster? Join the Empire, defeat the rebels? Yeah.
The one I'm talking about is I think it's protect your culture, join ICE.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's something out of Star Wars. It's join the Empire, fight the rebels. Stop those crazy space wizards. Yeah, I mean, look, it is. I just watched Inglourious Bastards last night. It's the first time I rewatched it in like a long time.
That's so good. I can talk about it. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That's a movie I'm really familiar with, so I feel like, oh, what's he gonna say?
And part of what's interesting about Inglourious Bastards is the whole thing, right, revolves around culture. And the idea that you have people arguing and debating about culture in the midst of a military and physical takeover, right? Like these Germans are arguing about, well, whether we should have this movie or how this movie should be seen, what movies should be seen, while occupying Paris, while taking people out of their homes, putting them in concentration camps, murdering families, but there's still at its core a discussion of culture, because ultimately he or she who controls the culture controls how people respond to the violence that they're being subjected to in a military way. That's what we see happening in the country, right? If you are, I was in Los Angeles in June when the president invaded Los Angeles under the guise of stopping immigration, right? Same thing in DC, where it's like, oh, we're here to stop crime. To the degree that you ever have any discussions about what the president's premises are, you're already giving him and ceding him too much power. It does not matter, because the reason is going to change, right? In New York, they're going to go to New York and they're going to say, we're stopping Sharia. They're going to go to Philly and they're going to say, we're stopping black militants. They're going to go to Detroit and they're going to say, we're stopping crime. They're going to go to Chicago and say, we're going to stop the Chi. It's going to be a different BS excuse for every single major metropolitan area. The only criteria is this president is saying, I will literally send the military to intimidate and abuse American cities in places I don't like. That's the issue. It ain't a crime issue, because the crime is not a driving force. Also, why wouldn't you send people to Houston? Because it's in a red state. Why wouldn't you send people to Atlanta? Because it's in a red state. So that's my thing with this. This is authoritarianism, and it is fascism. And to the degree that these armed guards are going to be empowered to get more aggressive and more violent with people, and that their accountability structure is not going to be connected to any municipal powers that you can interact with. If I get mistreated by a cop in Memphis, Tennessee, I can go to the local police department and complain. I can go to my city council and complain. I can go to police union and complain. I can go to my mayor and complain, ward president, whatever. There is a line of accountability that you can find. If you are bringing in federal troops to just harass the hell out of people whenever they walk down the street, who the hell do you call? And that's before they've got masks. So this is just stormtrooper behavior. That's the most important thing to me. I could give a rat's derriere about Sydney Sweeney and her non-derriere and whatever it is she's doing. I don't care about that sort of stuff as much. Yes, you have white nationalists showing up in commercials. Is it new? Her and the other guy who was from the Summer I Became Pretty nonsense. That's par for the course. I just saw The Naked Gun. There was a lot of MAGA coded stuff in that, even though I thought it was funny.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a funny movie, but a lot of MAGA stuff in there. The UFC, the whole thing about like roasting your genitals so that you're more virile and everything else like that. There's a lot of MAGA coded stuff in the movie.
It's such a weird one. You mentioned, and a lot of people are making a similar point about why is he sending it into DC or black cities and not red states. Well, there's black people in all of those red state cities. And I don't think the white folks in the cities care about more law enforcement. In fact, they welcome it. It makes them feel safer. I just had an argument with some white lady here in my local community. She's like, my daughter's going to DC and I'm glad that there's all that law enforcement out and she's safer. And so I feel like this is something to signal, regardless of where we're sending them. It really is to protect you from the black and brown people, the immigrants who are here to rape and pillage. And that's just making their case for them and making them feel better. Is it not as simple as that? What am I missing?
Well, that's part of it. But I mean, again, that's for people who already believe in this kind of crap, right?
Well, yeah.
Like, if that mom who you were talking to was already like, oh my God, I'm afraid of my daughter going to Washington, D.C. D.C. ain't any safer or worse. In fact, almost obviously by every actual mathematics statistic, right? It's not just crime has gone down, but it's at some of the lowest rates they've had in the last 15 or 20 years. I just had Brandon Scott on, who's the mayor of Baltimore. Brandon Scott is 42 years old. The mayor of Baltimore is 42 years old. He's in his second term. He has achieved in the first 6 months of 2025 the lowest homicide rate in 50 years. The lowest homicide rate in his lifetime.
Baltimore is a tough city to lead.
Yes. And he's in his second term at only 42 years old, just got reelected. So the point is, there are ways that you can achieve mass reductions in crime. And guess what? They never seem to be associated with hiring more or paying more for cops.
This violent interruption policy that is, I think, first piloted in Chicago. I know a guy who's running it in DC. I'm sure they're using it across the country now because it's so unbelievably wildly effective, especially for gang violence. It's not law enforcement. It's not more cops on the street. And it's not, by the way, this is a black thing. Black people will argue for corporal punishment. I was on Larry Wilmore's show with a panel of 3 black people arguing about spanking, and it was
Who were these black people
versus me. Smart, educated.
Was this his TV show on Comedy Central, or was this his podcast?
TV show.
Who did he have? Who was on this show? Because I have terrible things to say about all of them.
Okay, I'm going to try to find the clip. And so it was a real weird thing because I'd never argued with black people, period, much less on the air in that way. Mm-hmm. So that was weird for me. But this guy on Fox News last night, I think his name was like Jack Brewer, black guy, arguing we just need to bring back corporal punishment. Anyway, you can answer to all of that. But the more important and ridiculous point is that we need more law enforcement. When, as you said, there's so many proven tactics that are being utilized now to bring down violence, and we should resource them. But that's not what we see ever from conservative Republicans, because they know that putting more strong troopers on the street gets them more votes, gets them more support. But you don't agree with corporal punishment? No,
God. No. First off, I don't know if you've ever had her on the show, because I'm sure I've made reference to her. Dr. Stacey Patton.
Yes, I remember that episode you did. Yes.
Yeah. So, I ain't a spanking person. And I know there's a lot of sort of, what do you call it? Stockholm syndrome with people who were physically punished as children who grew up and say, I turned out great. Yeah, you know what? It's the Chris Rock joke of, you have the uncle that molests you, but he also pays for you to go to college. So it's like, well, I guess it paid off. No, it didn't. Right? Being corporal punished, being spanked, being hit as a child, it is not healthy psychologically. It is not healthy physically. It is not what is commanded in the Bible for people who use that excuse. It is generally bad parenting. It is bad parenting. You can discipline children. You can hold children accountable. You can navigate children without having to physically harm them. I mean, I'm sorry, because, when you hit kids, it don't necessarily lead to changes in behavior. You can play all the hot stove examples that you want. You don't have to burn your child's hand to say, don't touch the hot stove. So the thing about corporal punishment in the Black community is a lot of it is rooted in sort of retained trauma from enslavement. And the idea that
trauma. I talked to
the idea that I want to teach you to fear me because fearing me is likely to drive you better than facing the consequences of an outside world that wants you dead. And let's be very clear about the term trauma. I've been listening to Gabor Mate recently. It's been very, very fascinating, very helpful. And a lot of people mistake, conflate these terms, pain and trauma, right? Pain is what you feel in the moment. Trauma is if the wound is unhealed. Lots of pain you heal from, so it doesn't end up being trauma, right? Black people have never been able to collectively heal from white nationalism, white violence, and supremacy because that's how this country operates. So we still live in trauma. That being said, I ain't never going to argue to whip children. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's wise. It didn't make me a better person. And my parents didn't do it a lot, but it wasn't ever necessary to begin with. But Black people will argue this till the cows come home, at least those who I think are less enlightened.
I found the episode and I'm going to go watch it. I hope I didn't misremember it, but I do feel like it was one against.
Send me the link, text it to me, because I will watch that during the day, or I'll catch it sometime tonight.
It was like one woman was like a parenting expert, and I fashion myself a parenting expert from time to time, and a comedian, so that's why they booked me. But yeah, so anyway, we'll go back to that. And to the. What was the other thing I asked you about? Well, I think they wrapped it up.
So we were talking about that, and we were talking about sort of the ICE stuff and all these other kinds of things. I'll mention this also because this has to do with, say, Texas, right? And you got all these people who are on the run from Texas trying to stop Abbott from, this gerrymandering thing. And here's where I have to be like super duper honest. Everybody has to decide where they're going to draw their line in the sand for a fascist regime. Okay. There's just no world in which you can say that random federal agents, mad because you're flagrant, walking around with masks and no identification, grabbing people out of cars, homes, and businesses is okay. Period. Full stop. If you are not okay with that, you have to decide as an American citizen where you're going to stop. Are you going to report it? Are you going to call it? Are you going to do something? These people in Texas right now, these legislators who have left.
Yeah.
I understand the challenge that they're facing. I've had conversations with lots of people who are involved in this and people who are directing strategy. It's not easy to leave your home. It's not easy to flee the state. People got jobs, lives, bills. I mean, state legislators don't make very much money. They make like $600 a month for 3 months when the legislature's in session, right? But here's the thing. You don't have to capitulate and go in and give Abbott what he wants, because Republicans just want to rig the system so they never get held accountable by the voters. There are representatives in Texas right now who didn't leave the state. They got one woman down there. She's the longest serving member, I think, in the House. She was just on Roland Martin's show. I think it was last night. And she was like, I didn't leave because she's old. She's like, come get me. Pull up. Come to my house.
Oh, man.
Send a cop to my house and try and arrest me and drag me into the state house. Why? If I don't go to my job at Jimmy John's, the boss at Jimmy John's cannot send state troopers to come get me and say, you got to come back here and slather butter on sandwiches.
Does that state rep work at Jimmy John's?
No. Oh. But if she did work at Jimmy John's and the head of Jimmy John's International said, we're going to bring you back into work, I don't think they do it. If I decided to not show up to work at Morgan State, I would be very shocked if probably Westmore himself, because he's kind of a big dude, but I doubt that Westmore would send cops after me and say, you got to bring your black rear end back into the building. That's not how this sort of stuff works.
What if you worked at Jersey Mike's?
Some Jersey boys. That's kind of a different situation.
I think they've expanded. Okay, well, I got to let you go, I guess. But man,
Firehouse subs though, because they could carry me out of my house. So it's
a chain sub restaurant is a risk, but it's a risk I generally have taken in my life.
Yeah. Well, also you've had the benefit of being in and around metropolitan New York, where you can get just actual Subways, actual deli sandwiches that are made.
you go to a good deli and they have good meat and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I most of the places I've lived in my life, I don't have that. I haven't had that opportunity.
Well, I hope you're eating well. It makes it making me sound like you're not eating well.
No. But I cook a lot. I've told you this, Pete. I am a cook.
I know, but how do you come on?
Cook.
You're not cooking when you're doing all that traveling. You said at the beginning of this conversation. There's no way. How do you cook on the road?
Believe it or not. So it's one, because I sort of bounce from house to house a lot of times or visit different people. I will stay with people and cook at their houses. I will get, relatively healthy food where I am. Like I said, I'm recovering from having a tooth pulled, so it ain't like I'm eating heavy stuff anyway. I'm still dealing with
brutal. Yeah,
I'm still having a lot of soup and stuff like that. So I tend to eat very healthy, and then when I'm home, I cook. I had these giant squashes and zucchinis that a friend of mine gave me from like their garden, and I ate squash and zucchini. I had every single damn recipe you can think of for squash and zucchini for like a week and a half. The only thing I didn't make was zucchini cranberry salad because I didn't think I could eat it with my jaw being off.
Well, and also because it sounds fucking gross.
Oh yeah. But it doesn't mean you don't try. That's how I usually cook. I get an ingredient at like a dragon fruit or whatever. I get an ingredient on Monday and I just make stuff with it throughout the entire week. Everybody
watching and listening thinks that you're doing it right and that you're better, but there are some people who identify with me and say, no, I don't need to try that. I'm good.
You know what? Those people, the people like you, Pete, are Al-Qaeda. So, we don't have to. We know you're with Al-Qaeda. We know that you don't have a real commitment to American.
And all the way, there should be some kind of a phrase or reference to when you go all the way to Al-Qaeda. But
I had to go early 90s. I had to go late 90s, early 2000s.
I think the funnier joke there is naming some well-known murderer or sociopath.
If you're going to go full Dahmer, you're going to go full Dahmer.
In my case, I get a lot of Kaczynski, white bearded guy, lives in a shed. Hates technology. Almost
there is that. Didn't he die recently?
Yeah.
He didn't die in like the last 6 or 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that. Him, Kevorkian, all those guys, all these white guys with K's in their names.
But his manifesto lives on.
This is true. It's probably somewhere on Reddit. Or my personal favorite, because I've been convinced that 80% of TikTok is just Zoomers discovering crap that we already knew and acting shocked and offended. I'm sure there's some 23-year-old Zoomer right now being like, have you heard of this guy, Ted Kaczynski? Oh my God, he had a manifesto. That's all you have on TikTok.
Next time you see one of those types of things happen, send it to me, because I do know that was a case with bin Laden, right? But I didn't know that was something that was more widely spread. That's crazy. That's crazy if people are learning things now and learning them in such a way that is not accurate. And that was the last thing I didn't get you to weigh in on, how important it is to, understand history, much less erase it or create it in what we're seeing is a kind of a white supremacist version of it. Right. Last night you had that woman, I forget her name, on CNN arguing.
Jillian, the fitness person.
It was, I've heard that argument for a long time from white supremacists and ignorant folks and people who live down south, but just kind of whitewashing history and a way that I was so unbelievably disgusted and uncomfortable with as a way to defend what they're redoing in terms of federal government. I don't know. Say something about that and then I'll let you go. What they're doing and why it matters.
So there's a couple things with that. And I'll say just right off the top, I'm not usually a fan of that format. And the reason I'm not a fan of that format is because you put together a group of people to discuss a series of topics, but not all of them are equally informed, right? So if you want to have Jillian to come on and talk about RFK Jr. and fitness and health, I guess, I don't know. She's probably more qualified than he is to discuss those sorts of things. But once you start letting people, and it only happens with the right, once you start letting people just kind of pop off and say whatever the hell they want, you kind of need to put some control editorially or organizationally on what's happening. And I see a lot of nonsense, misinformation, and frankly, bullying on some of these debate shows. And it's always from the right on the left. And I don't see enough moderation of it. You can have vigorous debate and discussion, but you can't just let people say whatever the hell they want, because everybody isn't Mehdi Hassan, right? So, and I want to say this because this goes to the history. This has happened because we haven't had a chance to chat. That whole Mehdi Hassan thing he did with Jubilee.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Like, I did not like it. I didn't find it nearly as interesting as the numbers would indicate. And the main reason why is because this was a bad faith platforming of just fascists and Nazis. Mehdi Hassan literally wrote a book, How to Win Every Argument Every Time, No Matter the Circumstances, right? This wasn't even an intellectual version of like pros versus Joes, right? If you send me up against Deion Sanders, and Deion is older than me, right? Then again, he's missing a toe now. But I was about to say, if you put me against Deion in a foot race and that man is older than me, he might still be able to beat me, right? Yeah. Michael Jordan might still be able to beat me, and that man is in his 60s. So it's not good content other than it sort of normalizes these crazy fascist beliefs that are being expressed. That is not a good thing. That is not a healthy thing. There have been Jubilee debates that I thought were useful. The one with Jordan Peterson versus a bunch of atheists was actually fascinating. But what you'll notice about that is the atheists were all really informed.
Well, they always are.
Yeah, aren't they though? Like people who don't believe in, I won't say that, but atheists are like, I've never met a dumb atheist.
Yeah, because they're driven by a curiosity about the afterlife, and they usually often come from a religious background. And my whole education started and ended with George Carlin. I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need any more. But no, I absolutely see what you're saying in terms of you're not a fan of a show, or you're obviously not a fan of platforming fascists because it could normalize them. But also, it's a ridiculous thing to put Maxwell Frost on with a YouTube star, or even a Republican or Democratic strategist. And PhDs like you and Chrissy are always irritated, and rightfully so, when a show books someone like, say, me versus someone like you to talk about something. And that's a fair, that's a fair concern. Forget it if you don't want to use me, but you know what I'm saying? Like people with an agenda, or people that just don't have any right to be sitting at that table with that other person. This person's an expert on fascism, and this person's Scott Jennings. It's ridiculous.
And that's my thing. If it was about discussion, I don't have a problem. It's the debate where I have a problem.
Yeah, right. You don't have a problem with a format of well-educated people who are very disagreeable. You have a problem with putting a minor league baseball, it's not even a good example.
Or my thing is, or simply having people on the air who are not qualified to discuss that issue. So if you want to drag him out of whatever, community theater he's doing, you want to drag out Dean Cain, who hasn't been Superman since the first Nintendo Game Boy came out. You want to drag out Dean Cain and discuss wokeness in Hollywood, I guess, but I think you could probably find somebody who is still more actively involved in the industry to have that discussion. That is reasonable. That is a reasonable thing to do. What I don't like, and this is not entirely new, I remember this in the 90s. It was ABC Nightly News or NBC Nights, one of the nightly news shows, and they had a debate between like a climate scientist and Rush Limbaugh. What the hell, right? Rush Limbaugh shouldn't be debating climate science. If you want Rush Limbaugh to debate football, fine. It's entertainment. He can discuss it as much as the next person. That's where my frustration comes in, that you have people who aren't qualified to talk about the subject that's there. You notice I ain't going to get on the air and talk about Ukrainian military policy, because I'm not an Eastern Bloc expert. I could talk about domestic response to what's happening in Ukraine, but I'm not a Ukrainian expert, right? So I say that to say that kind of faux intellectualism and that idea of turning serious debates into a dopey discussion, that kind of let's debate the merits of German versus French films while people are being dragged out of their homes in Paris during the occupation and the Vichy government is twiddling their thumbs while this occurs. That leads to the erasure of history, because if every debate has to be concluded by the end of a commercial break or the end of a TikTok, then people don't realize that some of these things are long-term relevant issues that need to be discussed and addressed, and sometimes you don't have a clean answer.
That's such a great and important point. And the only thing I would add to it is when you have a historian arguing with a fitness expert, everybody loses in a way. And what it leads to, which is what you said, what it leads to, I think probably the best actual real answer and most imminently is the erasure of history is real bad. But the probably more prominent thing is the erasure of science. And what platforming conspiracy theorists and ignorant people leads to is the Health and Human Services Secretary with the brain worm, the conspiracy theorist in chief
who eats dead bear meat,
who
eats bear meat off the highway,
who will have a great opportunity to be our next president. I mean, this guy is now taken seriously, and he's in charge of the federal government's research, health, and that's what it leads to when you bring these people on and platform them, because they're convincing. Yeah. They're convincing.
Yeah, for dumb people, but lots of people are dumb.
Well, for ignorant people, for people who have no idea about history or about a subject, and you listen to someone who's articulate and eloquent with their arguments, it's convincing. Yes. Even if you have critical thinking skills, like, well, I didn't know that. I'd never heard that. And that's how they get you. A lot of people. And of course, if you're dumb, but I was giving them a little break. All right, go be with your family. Have a great day. It must be fun to hang out with you if you're a kid.
Dude, yes, I'm gonna try and hit you up this weekend. We need to like catch up. So I will hit you off the air. We have tons of stuff to catch up on
anytime,
and other things. Yeah. So I'm gonna try and hit you up this weekend. Yes,
I would really look forward to that. We will take a walk on the phone. Awesome. All right, bud. Thank you very much. Click out so I can talk about you.
Hold on, clicking out now. Can I click out? You're not gonna lose it?
Yeah. Click out at the bottom of that screen. I got it all. There he goes. It's jarring when he walks out. I just wanted to read some of the comments that I thought were funny. Rachel said, "I would drag Dean Cain," and Arneson writes, "Dean Cain would have kneeled to Zod," which is a Superman reference that I thought was really funny. And also Rachel, who works in domestic abuse space and anti-violence in Illinois, said, "Violence doesn't teach." I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about that. I was just so outraged when that guy was arguing for corporal punishment on Fox News. And that's why we have so much crime, because the only thing that works is to commit violence against people. Then they won't hijack you, carjack you. I said hijack. Like we have an epidemic of hijackers. If only you would have hit your kid, 9/11 never would have happened. I bet you those guys were hit. I'm going to go ahead and guess that those Al-Qaeda members got the shit kicked out of them by their dad. I don't know, but probably. And maybe their mom too. All right, well, I'm just here alone, and I didn't want to end because I have an audience, and a comedian or a host with an audience hates to leave, but I must go. Alas. I'm alas. Thank you guys for joining me. If you are a subscriber, you can come to our hangout tonight, which is really fun. Usually get 60 or 70 people there. We have a great conversation. I host, and I would love to see you. Just go to patreon.com/PeteDominic to become a paid subscriber. I get to interview the smartest people in the world every day. That's my job. And I recap the news for you on my daily podcast. So please go subscribe to it. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Maybe I'll see you tonight. Be well. Take care of yourself. Later.